So you want to own a nuclear power plant? Surprisingly, you can. You can even buy an existing one. But there is a catch. Buying the reactor does not mean you are allowed to operate it. Because when ownership of an American nuclear plant changes hands, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has to approve the transfer of its operating license. So your first purchase is the power plant. Your second purchase is several years of regulatory paperwork. And that may still be the easy part. A typical commercial reactor can produce roughly 1 gigawatt of electricity, enough power to serve a very large city. Unlike wind and solar, nuclear plants can operate around the clock, and existing reactors are built for extremely high availability. That makes the electricity valuable, especially now. Data centers, AI infrastructure, factories, and electrification are creating enormous new demand for reliable power. Suddenly, owning a machine capable of producing electricity continuously for decades looks considerably more interesting. But first, you need the plant. There are two ways to get one: buy an existing reactor or build your own. Buying is considerably faster. Building one means acquiring a large site, securing access to cooling water, connecting to the transmission grid, completing environmental reviews, obtaining regulatory approval, arranging billions in financing, and then constructing one of the most complicated machines humans operate. At utility scale, the cost quickly reaches billions, and overnight construction cost does not mean someone builds it overnight. That would be an unusually exciting evening. Once your plant exists, the business itself is surprisingly familiar. You make electricity, then you sell it. Depending on the market, your plant might sell electricity into a wholesale power market, operate under long-term contracts, or supply power directly through arrangements with large customers. And 1 gigawatt running continuously produces an enormous amount of electricity. This is the attraction. Once a nuclear plant is built, the uranium itself is only one part of the operating cost. Most of your expenses come from maintaining the plant, paying highly trained employees, complying with regulations, and keeping an enormous industrial facility working safely. Which brings us to your employees. You do not staff a nuclear reactor like a normal power station. You need licensed reactor operators, nuclear engineers, radiation protection specialists, electricians, mechanics, chemists, security officers, emergency planners, maintenance crews, and entire departments whose job is proving that another department followed the correct procedure. The plant operates around the clock. So does the responsibility. Routine maintenance can involve shutting the reactor down for refueling and replacing part of its fuel. During those outages, thousands of individual maintenance tasks may be completed before the plant returns to service. Every day offline means electricity you are not selling. But rushing maintenance on a nuclear reactor is generally considered an ineffective cost-saving strategy. Then there is security. A commercial nuclear plant is protected infrastructure. Access is tightly controlled. Employees undergo screening. Sensitive areas are restricted. Security forces protect the site, and emergency plans exist for scenarios everyone involved would strongly prefer remain theoretical. You are not just protecting expensive equipment, you are protecting nuclear material. Insurance reflects that unusual responsibility. Nuclear operators carry specialized liability coverage and may also be exposed to additional financial obligations if a serious incident exceeds the first layer of insurance. Most businesses buy insurance because something might go wrong. A nuclear plant buys insurance because legislators have spent decades calculating exactly how wrong it could theoretically go. But the reactor itself is not your only concern. You also have spent nuclear fuel. After uranium fuel has spent several years inside the reactor, it is removed. It stops being useful for normal operation. It does not stop being radioactive. Initially, spent fuel is typically stored underwater in heavily engineered pools that remove heat and provide radiation shielding. It can later be transferred into massive dry storage containers. So congratulations! Your electricity business now has inventory that remains hazardous long after the customer has finished using the electricity. And unlike ordinary industrial waste, radioactive material is heavily regulated throughout handling, storage, transportation, and disposal. Still, if the reactor runs reliably and electricity prices cooperate, an existing nuclear plant can be an extraordinary asset. The expensive construction has already happened. The transmission connection exists. The workforce understands the plant, and reactors can potentially operate for many decades. That helps explain why older nuclear plants can suddenly become strategically valuable when electricity demand rises. But there is one bill waiting at the end that every owner has to think about from the beginning. You eventually have to dismantle it. Nuclear plants cannot simply be abandoned when they stop making money. The owner must decommission the facility, remove radioactive materials, dismantle contaminated structures, clean the site, and satisfy regulators that the property meets required standards. That can cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Owners therefore have to demonstrate that money will be available for decommissioning while the plant is still operating. In other words, the government wants proof that future you has money. Future you appreciates the thought. And shutting the reactor down does not necessarily end your involvement quickly. Decommissioning can stretch across decades. During that time, the property may still need security, monitoring, maintenance, regulatory oversight, and specialized workers, even though it is no longer producing electricity. An operating reactor is expensive. A retired reactor can also be expensive. It just has the disadvantage of no longer selling anything. Could you realistically own one? Not personally. The practical buyers are utilities, infrastructure investors, energy companies, and consortiums capable of financing enormous transactions and satisfying regulators that they have the technical and financial resources to operate the plant safely. But technically, nuclear plants are private assets. They can be bought, they can be sold, and they can generate enormous amounts of electricity for decades. Which closes the question we started with. Buying the nuclear power plant really might be the easy part. The difficult part is convincing regulators that you can operate it, finding hundreds of specialists who know exactly what every valve does, selling enough electricity to cover enormous fixed costs, storing radioactive fuel, maintaining security around the clock, and putting aside hundreds of millions of dollars so that one day you can carefully take the entire thing apart. You can own a nuclear power plant. You just need billions of dollars, government approval, a small army of nuclear engineers, and the financial discipline to save for a demolition project that may begin decades after you buy it.